Interested in movies and Venezuelan history live in Carabobo? This event is for you. This Friday, July 18th, we will present to the public free of charge the exclusive premiere of the movie The Trial of Marcos Perez Jimenez. This is an unreleased La Nueva Enciclopedia documentary on the extradition and unprecedented trial of former President Marcos Perez Jimenez in Venezuela in the 1960s. This cultural and academic event will be held at 3:30 p.m. in the Centenario Hall of the Valencia Bar Association. And in addition, it will feature a brief lecture by myself and other special guests. Catch this documentary that has already packed auditoriums at Universidad Católica de Bolivia, URU, in Maracaibo, and Universidad de los Andes in Mérida. A highly positive experience in an atmosphere of mutual respect and cordiality. And I remind you that admission is free for everyone. Our mission is nothing else. What are we proposing? To promote the education of all Venezuelans. I'll be waiting for you there, Carabobeños, on Friday, July 18th. Tell your friends. The French May movement of 1968 preceded the 1970s and a Europe that was confused with itself. But this same period would be shaken by the rebellion of a man of arms, Tomar from Táchira, Venezuela. Seen as a hero by some, a terrorist by others, the unique episodes this man starred in made him the center of worldwide attention. And he is currently serving a life sentence in a French prison. For many years, he was one of the most wanted men by the secret services of Israel, the United States, France, Germany, and other sworn enemies. Meanwhile, he received applause from Iran, Syria, Libya, and the Palestinian people. From being a militant in the Popular Front for the liberation of Palestine to having his own armed cells, Ilich Ramirez Sanchez, nicknamed Carlos the Jackal, took the Palestinian and anti-Zionist cause with violence to unimaginable places. And then, like Saint-Germain-des-Prés and the Latin Quarter in Paris, two of his notorious attacks, he was one of the most wanted international fugitives for more than a decade, living incognito in several countries, even in his homeland, Venezuela. Today we'll examine the controversial life of one of the most notorious terrorists of the 20th century. This is Ronaldo Carrillo, and this is the new encyclopedia. And I invite you to support us by subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and leaving your comments, which we always read, by activating the bell, notifications, and above all, sharing it with all your friends on social media, on WhatsApp, and anywhere else. Without further ado, let's start with today's video. Born in San Cristobal, Táchira State, on October 12, 1949, Ilich Ramirez Sanchez is a baby boomer, the son of a wealthy lawyer with strong positive passions for the Soviet October Revolution, to the point that his three sons each bear one of the three names of the communist icon, Vladimir Ilich Lenin. His father, a member of the Communist Party of Venezuela, was named José Altagracia Ramirez Navas, and his wife Elba Maria Sanchez. Ilich's parents divorced when he was 4 years old, but they continued living under the same roof, where school teachers taught Marxism all the way. After his primary education at home, young Ilich goes to the Fermin Toro High School in Caracas and joins the youth wing of the Communist Party. In January 1966, he attends the Third Tricontinental Conference of the so-called movements against colonialism and imperialism with his father. That same year, his mother leaves for London to study at Stafford House College in Kensington and the London School of Economics. She brings her son so he can get an international education. By 1968, his father attempts to enroll him at Sorbonne University, but a KGB spy in England identifies Ilich as a potential recruit, and he finally decides, thanks to the efforts of the Venezuelan Communist Party, to get a scholarship to study in the Soviet Union. Ilich Ramirez decides in London, at the age of 19, to honor his name by volunteering at the Soviet Union Embassy. He spends intermittent periods at the Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow, an institution funded by communism to train the communist vanguards of the so-called Third World. There, he enjoys vodka in the company of girls, indulging in parties that clash with the Red Era's strict moralism. The Soviet authorities dismiss the preferences of the man from Tachira, and by refusing to submit to the discipline of the revolution tamed in the classrooms, he ends up being expelled from that university. It's the 1970s, and the libertarian, irreverent, and hedonistic mentality of the French May is spreading throughout the world. But they hardly imagined that the place. Countries such as France, Italy, and Germany would be deeply shaken by a surge of anti-Zionist attacks. After his expulsion from university in Moscow, Illich would feel very attracted to these growing subversive and armed movements spreading all over the world. Recommended by his contacts made in Moscow, he began to join the Palestinian ranks, moving to Jordan, where he trained with none other than the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. When he joined their ranks, Illich began using the false name Carlos Andrés Martínez Torres, a supposed Peruvian economist. After 1973, now linked to numerous anti-Zionist groups, he began to frequent London, where he enrolled at the Central London Polytechnic, and also Paris, where he lived with radical extremists. In France, the so-called Boudia Command was established, which was the liaison organization of the Palestinian Liberation Front with other European radical groups. There he would begin to come into the public eye, risking his life in attacks against Zionist civilian targets in Europe. His first known action took place in 1973. That year he took the alias Carlos with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and he attempted a failed assassination against Joseph Seif, a businessman from the Marks and Spencer brand and vice president of the Zionist Federation of Great Britain. This stroke of luck and initiation would strengthen his inclination toward political violence and the adrenaline it brought him. By 1974, he tried again unsuccessfully to plant an explosive device in a London bank. By August that year, he reached a new level of violence. His unit planted 3 car bombs at 3 major Paris newspaper headquarters, and a month later the activities didn't stop. Illich organizes a hostage-taking at the French embassy in The Hague, although he doesn't take part in its execution, which is carried out by 3 Japanese militants. That same month, Carlos detonates an M26 type grenade in a pharmacy owned by a Jew in Saint-Germain, leaving 2 dead and 34 injured. Carlos grows more involved in the cause and broadens his actions. On January 13, 1975, Illich carried out an attack with a rocket-propelled grenade, 7 rocket launcher at Orly Airport against a Boeing 706 of the Israeli airline. But the man from Tachira, inexperienced with this type of weapon, failed when firing the artillery weapon. The plane did not explode, but the rocket blew up another vehicle. Carlos reloaded the rocket launcher and missed again. This time, the projectile pierced a Yugoslavian Douglas C-9. Even so, Carlos manages to escape, and 6 days later he returns to Orly with 2 other people to recover the rocket launcher hidden in the garbage dump. There, they head towards the airport terrace. In the middle of this, they are spotted by security, and in response, they take 2 people hostage in the hallway. In exchange for sparing their lives, they ask for and get a plane to escape to Baghdad, Iraq. This attack leaves 21 people seriously injured. Soon after, Carlos returns to France to resume his operations. His modus operandi had served him so far to keep him safe from the security agencies. However, this was about to change. The armed cell of which Illich Ramirez was a member, released by Mikhail Mukarbal from the Palestinian Liberation Front. However, Mukarbal was a Lebanese double agent who worked for the Jewish Mossad. Mukarbal was arrested by the French police, and when he was interrogated, he convinced them that the leader of the organization was actually Illich Ramirez and offered to turn him over to the authorities. On June 27, 1975, 3 French officials went with the Lebanese Mukarbal to the apartment where Carlos was living with other South Americans. At that moment, Carlos was about to experience cold-blooded murder for the first time. When they enter the apartment and accuse him, Eilish pulls out his pistol and shoots the French police officers and the Lebanese Mukarbal at point-blank range, leaving the third French commissioner seriously wounded. This puts him on the front page of the European press, which, by the way, he liked to read, described in the press as his own exploits, and he collected them as trophies. 2 days after the murders, when Carlos Andrés Perez was the president of Venezuela, the consul of Venezuela in London, Elias Casado receives a call from the secretary of the presidency of the Republic of Venezuela, named Gladys Velázquez, with the instruction not to, a demand that the diplomat fulfill his duty and protect a Venezuelan citizen. The order was carried out so negatively that apparently Carlos would find refuge in the home of the embassy's first secretary, Delia Fuentes, on Brazil Street near the Harrods store in London. The then Venezuelan ambassador to England, Carlos Perez de la Cova, uncomfortably informed Scotland Yard that he had received certain instructions from the presidency of Carlos Andrés Perez. In this way, Carlos the Jackal gets a brief respite under the protection of high-ranking compatriots. Anyway, after this brief respite, Illich is forced to disappear into South Yemen, where the armed cell reorganizes, and they prepare for what would be the biggest leap to worldwide fame for this Venezuelan from Táchira. Illich Ramirez was in charge of organizing and leading, on December 21, 1975, the kidnapping of 11 ministers of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, who were meeting in Vienna, during a conference of the leaders at the headquarters of this organization. Among them was his compatriot, Minister Valentin Hernandez Acosta, accompanied by the Germans Hans Joachim Klein, Gabriel Kreutzer Tiedemann, the Lebanese Anik Nakaachi, and the Syrian Kamal Kir Bake. Carlos takes 66 hostages in total. The main demand of the commando, which calls itself the arm of the Arab Revolution, was the liberation of Palestine from the usurpers of its territory. To do this, Carlos plans to interrupt the meeting, kidnap the 11 oil ministers present at the location, and, by order of his superiors, spare the lives of 9, but kill 2 others, the Saudi Ahmed Saki Yamani and the Iranian Hamsid Amusagar. By this time, Carlos's character and his known willingness to kill in cold blood were already well established. Carlos and his team managed to get past the entrance hall, guarded by 2 Austrian police officers, and go straight up to the first floor, where they start shooting in all directions. The police inspector at the scene, 60 years old, tries unsuccessfully to disarm Carlos. But Crocker Tiedemann, the team's only woman, shoots him dead as he tries to escape. Minutes later, the 27-year-old Iraqi security agent, who was the bodyguard of the Iraqi minister, tries to disarm this woman and ends up being shot by the kidnappers. Carlos takes care of a third agent, who was a Libyan delegate, by shooting him in the neck. It was at that precise moment, at 11 o'clock, when Agent Joseph Yanda used the phone in an office where he was being held, Carlos to alert his colleagues at the police station about the situation. Shortly after, Carlos and his team enter the hall where the ministers' meeting is taking place. They quickly take control of the meeting, injuring a member of the Kuwait delegation. In no time, the news was already reaching the main international news wires. At 11 in the morning, a police commando of 8 people, including a driver, arrived at the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries headquarters. 4 members positioned themselves around the building to prevent the kidnappers from escaping and to cover their 3 teammates who have just entered. The latter, led by Inspector Kurt Leopolder, cannot use the elevator, which was blocked by the corpse of one of the murdered, and therefore they go up to the first floor by the same stairs that Carlos and his team had taken 10 minutes earlier. When he reaches the first floor, Inspector Leopolder sees the Iraqi people, Al-Khafari, dying on the floor. It was then that he was discovered by Klein, who was one of Carlos's henchmen, and immediately shot him. Inspector Leopolder retaliates before going back downstairs and asks his colleagues to take care of the dying Iraqi. The multiple exchanges of gunfire between Klein and Leopolder end up wounding both men. Klein retreats to the hallway kitchen to assess his wounds, which he underestimates. Upon hearing the news of the confrontation with the police, Carlos approaches him and advises him to throw an RGD-5 grenade in his direction. But Klein executes it clumsily. The grenade is lethal. Within a radius of 12 meters, it lands 4 meters from him and 6 meters from his target, who also had time to take cover. The explosion causes a deafening roar, but most of the fragments are absorbed by the left wall, and fortunately neither Klein nor Leopolder suffer any additional injuries. Meanwhile, Kafari, who had been shot by the other 2 police officers, died choking on his own blood. The situation reached a point after intense negotiations. The next day, Carlos, along with the other armed militants and accompanied by 42 hostages, were granted a Douglas DC-9 commercial airplane to depart for Algeria. The plane was piloted by a former member of the Royal Navy who also served as Muammar Gaddafi's personal pilot. Upon arriving in Algiers, they released 30 hostages and then set off for Tripoli, where they disembarked another group of hostages. And then they returned to Algiers again, where the rest of the captives are released. Carlos and his collaborators are granted asylum there. Shortly after, Carlos leaves for Algeria, then to Libya, and later heads to Aden in Yemen, where he had to answer for his actions before the leaders of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who reproach him for not having executed the 2 ministers. They initially planned to kill that same day, and also reproach him for not having demanded money as ransom. With the support of the Yemenis, Moscow's tolerance, and the backing of Western European subversive groups, who managed to secure funds for him from Soviet Germany, Carlos reorganizes his forces and merges them with German cells to form his own gang. And so he begins to strengthen ties with countries like Libya, Iraq, Romania, and Syria. The clientele of his armed group includes several rulers from the Middle East. He also supplies weapons to Euskadi Ta Haskatasuna. He always coordinates deals from the shadows, fleeting, ubiquitous, and impossible to catch. Carlos uses a Yemeni passport to travel to Paris, passing through Moscow, Budapest, and West Berlin. From 1979 to 1985, he lives in Budapest. Wanted by all police services in Europe, he was one of the most sought-after international fugitives during that time. Then he barricaded himself in Beirut, Lebanon, where his life of excess clashed with the Muslim fundamentalism that Carlos himself supported. In 1982, after the defeat of the Palestinians, the Lebanese asked Carlos to leave. In this way, he keeps a low profile until February 26, 1982, when he sends a statement to the French embassy in The Hague, which he authenticates with his fingerprints. He demands the release of his collaborator and right-hand man, Bruno Breguet, and his girlfriend, the German Magdalena Klopp. They had been arrested in Paris with some explosives after being betrayed by an Arab agent, whom Carlos tried to blackmail. After the arrest of his collaborators in France, Carlos unleashes his fury against the French nation. He blows up a train car on the capital Paris-Toulouse line, leaving 5 dead and 77 injured in 1982. Then, he sets off a car bomb in front of the Al-Watan Al-Arabi newspaper on April 22, leaving 1 dead and 63 injured. Then he carries out another attack in Marseille on December 31, 1983. For me, Carlos finally reunites in Damascus, Syria, with his wife, Magdalena Klopp, who was released for good behavior after serving a 6-year sentence. He also reunites with his daughter, Elba Rosa Ramirez Klopp. The couple lives a semi-clandestine life in the Syrian capital, but Carlos is an uncomfortable guest for the Syrians, who at that time, as a government, were trying to gain a place on the international stage. By 1991, Syria allies with the United States in the Gulf War and the Muqarabat. They force Carlos to leave the country and head to Sudan. There, he is received by the Sudanese Secret Service on behalf of Sheikh Hasina, However, this change of location would be fatal for his freedom. Now, before the episode of his capture, just as the diplomatic assistance from Venezuela helped him in 1975, his relationships with members of the Venezuelan consular service and Carlos Andrés Pérez's connivance would help him again during his years as a fugitive before he was caught. It's not widely known that thanks to personal efforts by the former president from Táchira in the early 1990s, Carlos the Jackal received a diplomatic passport to enter Venezuela incognito. Following this, the governments of Ramón José Velázquez and Rafael Caldera showed leniency towards the Jackal. They let his wife, Magdalena, and daughter, Elba Rosa Klopp, live there since 1991. In 1994, in Caracas, in the neighborhood where a good part of the diplomatic offices of Venezuela were located during Rafael Caldera's government, Minister Ramón Escobar Salón confirmed that the family of Jackal lived in Venezuela in complete legality. According to his own words, Jackal enjoyed excellent relations with the intelligence services of his country in Venezuela, who assigned him 5 bodyguards and took care of him during his stay in a neighborhood in Las Mercedes, Caracas, where he received leftist leaders such as Américo Martín and José Vicente Rangel, who later, as Minister and Vice President Hugo Chávez, advocated for his release. And since the Chavista Revolution, Jackal and his family would find a lot of sympathy. His brother, Lenín Ramirez Sánchez, was appointed director of the Ministry of Energy and Mines in 2002, which was the 3rd most important position in that department. His first cousin, Rafael Ramirez Carreño, served as Minister of Energy and Mines and headed Petróleos de Venezuela from 2004 to 2013. Let's return to Carlos the Jackal's life on the run. The deputy director of the French police found out from the CIA that Illich was in Sudan by 1994. The CIA assigned an operative named Billy Wolf to follow him for months and managed to take pictures of him. Had Carlos in Sudan degenerated? After being that guerrilla playboy who achieved worldwide fame, now he lived in a state of obesity, alcoholism, and a lot of promiscuity, frequenting hotels to drink until he was removed from the place by his burly bodyguard. The French contacted the Sudanese, who strongly denied that the terrorist was there. However, secret negotiations would determine the fate of the Jackal. By August 14, 1994, an unmarked jet slowly landed on one of the darkened runways of the Sudanese airport. 12 hooded men silently slip out of the plane under command, including General Philippe Rondeau, who tracked Carlos the Jackal step by step with the support of the CIA, and who, along with the contacts from the services of the French police, track the pilgrimages of the controversial Venezuelan. At 3 a.m, Carlos is taken out of a room at the Ibn Khaldun Hospital, where he was admitted while waiting for an inguinal hernia operation. They deceive him, saying it's for his safety, and put him in a van. Once there, they put a burlap sack over his head, take him out, and speed off to the airport to board the French jet. 6 hours later, the plane arrives at the Villa Kublai military airport in Paris. The prisoner realizes that he has fallen into the hands of the French, who have been pursuing him for 2 decades, but he doesn't know that his kidnapping was negotiated by the Sudanese. In exchange for the Sudanese army's right to pass through Central African territory controlled by France, this would let their Sudanese troops attack the South African guerrillas inspired by Christianity and animism from behind, with whom they were already fighting. They also requested aerial photos showing the guerrillas' exact positions in exchange for handing over the Jackal. Illich Ramirez is confined in La Sante prison in solitary confinement, tried in Paris, and sentenced to 3 life sentences for the murders of the French police officers, the grenade attack, and the previously described attacks. He was transferred to Clairvaux prison in 2006 and has been aging there ever since. In the end, suddenly stripped of his magical ability that made him elusive and omnipresent, and due to the effects of aging in prison, the then most wanted terrorist. From the 70s until the mid-90s, ended up confined to a cell, humiliated by his pursuers, Gauls, more fierce, who together with the services of one of the bravest CIA operatives of the time, managed to track him down because they never forgot his actions that shook European soil. The man, in the twilight of his life, in the midst of his controversial history, with his hands stained with blood according to some, or with heroism according to others, became a famous figure. Latin American current affairs of the 20th century. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I remind you that your support means a lot to us. Always sharing the content, leaving your comments, liking the video, turning on the notification bell, and interacting with the channel in general. Thank you all, and God bless you.